Well, one of the largest issues that Wichita may decide this year is whether to increase the city's sales tax in order to pay for a variety of projects. And recently, the Kansas Policy Institute released the results of a survey of Wichita voters concerning Wichita's economy and government. In its news release, KPI concluded that Wichita voters are opposed to business incentives, they want to preserve privatization over tax increases, and they have concerns about how City Hall has recently spent money. Now, this was a scientific survey of 502 registered Wichita voters conducted by Survey USA, a company that's widely used and respected across the country. The full results with crosstabs, questions, and methodology, it's available at kansaspolicy.org or also at my site, wichitaliberty.org. Here are some of the survey results illustrated in charts that I made. I showed these first few charts 2 weeks ago on this show, so we'll just review them for now. But the first question the survey asked was, in the past few years, have Wichita city officials used taxpayer money efficiently or inefficiently? And overall, 58% of Wichita voters believe that city spending was inefficient compared to 28% believing spending was efficient. And the second question the survey asked was, in general, do you agree or disagree with the idea of local governments using taxpayer money to provide subsidies to certain businesses for economic development? And overall, 56% disagreed with using taxpayer money to provide subsidies to certain businesses for economic development. 34% agreed. And the third question was, would you personally be willing to pay a higher sales tax in the city of Wichita to fund incentives to businesses expanding in Wichita or moving here from other states? And the overall results were 63% said no, and only 28% said yes. And this pattern of asking voters whether they would be personally willing to pay a higher sales tax was repeated for several other areas of government spending. And in these questions, again asking if Wichita voters would be willing to pay a higher sales tax to provide certain services, a pattern appeared. Voters are willing to pay for things that are fundamental in nature and less willing to pay for others. And as can be seen in this chart, voters are willing to pay for infrastructure and more willing to pay for maintenance of existing infrastructure rather than for new infrastructure. And voters are most willing to pay for securing a long-term water source. For business incentives, downtown development, and convention centers, Wichita voters express less willingness to pay higher sales tax to fund these items. And it's a pretty big difference, usually greater than a 2-to-1 margin. Well, here are some results from the survey questions that I'm presenting to you for the first time. Question 9 asked how Wichita voters preferred paying for new government spending. The question was, to fund existing infrastructure, build new infrastructure, and secure a long-term water source, should Wichita fund these items by adjusting spending and being more efficient, or by raising taxes? And overall, 78% of Wichita voters answered yes, meaning that they prefer that Wichita adjust spending and become more efficient. 12% answered no, meaning they were in favor of raising taxes instead. And a related question was, should Wichita fund those items through public-private partnerships or privatization rather than raising taxes? And overall, 65% answered yes, meaning they prefer the public-private partnerships or privatization. 25% answered no, indicating a preference for raising taxes. So the conclusion is that Wichita voters prefer adjusting spending, becoming more efficient, using public-private partnerships and privatization over raising taxes. And this is an important result. The city's political class, and by that I mean almost all elected officials, city hall bureaucrats, leaders of groups like the Wichita Metro Chamber of Commerce and the Wichita Eagle Editorial Board, well, they all say they hate to raise taxes, but it's really the only thing they consider. And I don't think it's a stretch to say these people are salivating over the prospect of more of other people's money to spend. To the political class, increasing the sales tax in Wichita is a foregone conclusion. As an example, here's what the Wichita Eagle's Rhonda Holman wrote this week. After running down the list of various projects that the political class wants to spend on, she concluded, whether voters buy into a sales tax increase will depend a lot on which projects rise to the top of the council's to-do list in the coming days, and later, how loud the none of the above chorus gets. Well, in her editorial, Holman never mentioned what voters really want: adjusting spending, becoming more efficient, using public-private partnerships, and privatization. Anyone who objects is relegated to a chorus, the none of the above chorus. I'm surprised she didn't mention the cave people, citizens against virtually everything. Because you see, the political class doesn't really distinguish between government action on one hand and people cooperating voluntarily in free markets on the other hand. And as we're learning, there is a severe disconnect between what the people want and what the political class wants. Now, usually we frame political debates as contests between Democrats and Republicans, or maybe between liberals and conservatives. But on the Wichita City Council, all these groups agree on one thing: government should grow at the expense of the private sector. Well, they won't come right out and say that. Well, at least most ones, few will. But it's what they want. It's what the political choice field of economics and political science explains, as we've explored in past episodes of Wichita Liberty TV. And in past episodes, we've also talked about the concept of log rolling. Usually this refers to how in Congress or legislatures the members will agree to support other members' projects in exchange for support. A common example, one that our former United States Senator Bob Dole was instrumental in forging, is the joining of the Farm Bill with the food stamps program. What do these two programs have to do with each other? Why should farm subsidies be mixed in with food stamps? Well, the answer is that by joining the two programs in one bill, there's something for both rural and urban lawmakers to support. Farm state representatives will hold their nose while they vote for food stamps, and they'll tell their constituents that voting for food stamps was necessary in order to get farm subsidies. And urban legislators will say the reverse, that they had to vote for farm subsidies in order to get the food stamps for the inner city poor. Now, in Wichita, some are advocating that the sales tax vote be held incrementally. An example would be voting to dedicate 1/10 of a cent sales tax for water supply, maybe 1/4 of a cent for economic development, and so forth. But I think it's much more likely that Wichitans will be asked to approve a large sales tax increase, 1 full cent per dollar or even more, to support a whole list of projects. There will be something for everyone to like. And voters will be faced with the choice of voting for something we probably really do need, like water and street maintenance, and along with things like a new library, convention center, passenger rail, and the like. I think it's likely that we'll see this example of log rolling in action as Wichita City leaders seek to expand Wichita government.